Hello there, welcome to Fully Painted. In today's episode I'm going to show you how I painted these Stegadons from Age of Sigmar for my Seraphon army. Why are these called Stegadons and not Triceratons? I do not know, but regardless I'm going to show you how I did it. This project is going to be in two videos. The first video is going to be on the dinosaurs themselves. The second one will be on the crew, the platforms and the bases. Since the models are big centerpiece models in the army, I'm gonna spend a lot of time on them. I will also try and have both painted in different schemes, one red and one purple. And with that said, grab your brushes, we're going to the lab. The first step of this paint job is to paint the white skin, which is a kind of a defining feature of this Seraphon army. I start by base coating it all blue and then do a zenithal with my airbrush of a very light grey. I take my time with it and do like multiple passes to sort of get a mid-tone, as you can see right now on the Stegadon. Since it's very thin, it builds up a very blue-grey color on the belly. And then I do multiple passes on areas that take more light, like the top of the Stegadon and the face, obviously. You can do this with a can, of course, or well, two cans, a blue one and a grey one, like Grace here from Citadel. It will work just fine. After the white skin, I want to tackle all the colored skin that is going to be on top of the Stegadons. One is going to be red and one is going to be purple. I do this with the airbrush to get very smooth paint job and also to do this very fast. But you don't have to do it, you can just grab a very big brush and do that as well. I use contrast paint here for the red, I think it's Blood Angel Red. And for the purple skin, I think I used a mix of violet and magenta. As you can see, I'm a bit too hasty with it. I just spray wildly, but it's fine. We're gonna tidy it up later. I also dab the paint in the meeting zones between the colored skin and the white skin to make it more natural. I also try to do a sort of zenithal highlight of the colored skin. Here you can see with, I think I grabbed Chimera color and added a bit of flesh tone to it. And I do the same for the magenta, add a bit of flesh tone to it and just spray from above, mostly on the head, but at the body as well. And after the airbrush is done, I just grab my brush and go back to my red to add some flesh tone to it for highlights. It's better to use flesh tones to highlight red. Otherwise, if you highlight it with yellow, it can read too orange, and if you do with white only, it can read too pink. So mixing them both and using a flesh tone is gonna sort of keep the red mid-tone underneath, or the red feel of your paint job. So right now I'm highlighting the head. I try to go for a very volumetric highlight to sort of emulate how real light work in real life. So to do that, I try to look at my miniature as if my eyes were the light from the sun, and that allows me to see where the light would hit or should hit the model. I'm on my second highlight here, and you can see I really take my time with it and go highlight every bit of skin with a bigger focus on the head, obviously, as it's a big part of the miniature or a part that I want to draw focus on. I don't highlight everything to the max yet, because I want to put more colors on the models first before I go to my final highlight. After the skin, it's time for the scales. I do a first base coat layer with a darkish purple, and then I try doing a dark purple wash on it. I tried speeding my highlight steps by using my airbrush and doing a zenithal highlight on the scale as well, but it kind of killed the contrast in between the scales, so I'm gonna have to correct that later. After that, I just use my brush to continue my highlights. I use the same logic as for the skin, as in using volumes, and for the face that means mostly hitting the top facing part and the top of the scales. I also highlight the scales on the back, which is kind of a waste of time, to be honest, because it's going to be covered by the platform, so you're not going to be able to see those highlights, but I do not care because I seem to want to be a completionist, and maybe I just like paint, I don't know. Anyways, I replicated those steps on the purple Stegadon, but using very saturated violet colors instead. This purple is a bit more desaturated. I highlighted by adding a mix of flesh colors and off-white as well as I keep going higher and higher. I push the highlight very high on those scales because I kind of want a very shiny, hard surface kind of vibe. And now it's time for all the black bits on the model. That means the horns and the claws and whatnot, and all the spiky bits that are on the model. And believe me, there's a lot of it. So as you can see, I did a first base coat of a darkish grey on all of them before doing one coat of Black Templar contrast paint. After that, I go to highlight by using my grey again. And again, I highlight using volumes. So for now, my grey is mostly hitting top-facing parts of all the horns on the miniatures and the spike bits. As you can see, I try to highlight a lot of the bits of the horns that are closer to the head to use that as a way to draw focus on the head itself. I do a lot of steps on this highlight to make it somewhat smooth. As you can see on those side bits, I put a highlight on the middle to make it look shiny. I try to look for spaces that really gather light to help with the shininess of all those black horns. I'm looking for a sort of obsidian hard horn vibe, but I went a bit too light with the grey on that to look for obsidian, so maybe a glaze of Black Templar contrast paint would be enough to bring it all back to a very dark color. But it still works for me because I did push the highlight very high on the spots that really do gather light, as you can see here in the middle of the horns, at least the base of the horns. When you highlight horns, if you want to do it in a volumetric way, you have to think of how is the horn facing the light. And here it doesn't mean highlighting the tip of the horn, because here the base of the horn is the one gathering the most light, as the curve of the horn is a bit too high and hides it from the direction of the sun. It's not only more realistic, but it also helps with getting the viewer to look directly at the face. I highlight this grey by adding mostly off-white to it, and I just add it more and more and more, and go smaller and smaller and smaller in the areas that I apply those highlights. It's just layering, but the most important part is knowing where to apply the highlights and how far to push them, of course. So it can seem like this is a bit too high and it reads a lot more grey than it does black, but that's probably because you just see it from the top here. You're not seeing the darker bits that make it look like it's a black thing. You'll see that on the later pictures. For finishing touches, I go back to highlight stuff that I think I didn't go far enough, like the scales, especially on the head, and the red skin, because now I have a clearer picture of where I'm standing in terms of highlights everywhere, thanks to having completed the black. All of this is highlighted by just adding more off-white to the previous colors I used. For the mouth, I go simple because it's in shadow, so I just use voluminous pink contrast paint inside the mouth, on the tongue as well mostly, and then I just hit the teeth with khaki color. I add a bit of white to the tongue before applying a more thin contrast paint to make it look lighter. I want to also make the white skin look a bit more alive, so I spray some blue ink from underneath, and mostly on the knees, the feet, as you would do for a human skin. Like you would try to add some red to elbows, knees, knuckles and whatnot. So I'm trying to replicate that on my dinosaur here, just using blue instead of red. You don't have to use the airbrush for this, obviously. You can use a brush, but I wanted to try it out with the airbrush. I have to correct my lack of contrast on the scale as well, in terms of darkness in between all the scales, which I kind of obliterated with my airbrush. So I just mixed a very dark purple oil wash, and I'm trying to sort of pin wash all the scales here. For the bronze, I go for a more simple recipe. I do a first base coat of my bronze color, which here is mostly Greenstuff World Metal Pigment Bronze. It's a very great color that I recommend you grab because it looks insanely good. After that, I do a heavy coat of gold ground fur on all the bronze bits. This allows me to shade my bronze, and if you've seen my Pterodon video, you know I used to do this as a careful glaze, but here I just want to speed things up by doing a heavy coat of it all over the bronze bit. What I do though is some more careful glazes of a darker brown. I think it's Psycho Brown here, that I use on the very underside of the metal bits. The idea here is I'm trying to boost the contrast and also direct the light and the highlights and shadow of my metal. I don't want the metal colors to do all the work. I'm trying to follow sort of NMM principles when I do this. As you can see, it's sort of glazing to make the metals look more interesting. I don't have to do a pin wash as well because the contrast page kind of took care of that job. So now I just boost the shadows on bits that I think need it. After that, I go back to my bronze and just apply it on top facing surfaces. And I think it looks really good in contrast with all the bits that were covered by the contrast wash. I try to do edge highlights when appropriate as well, because it looks really good on metals. And then I do a final highlight with a sort of silver on very tiny spots. I feel like the combination of all those techniques make the metal look really, really good and realistic. And I enjoy this recipe. I'll try to see if I can improve it a bit, but it looks really cool to my eye. And that's it for the dinosaurs. They're finished. I'm really happy with how they look and how they turned out. I think I got a very nice focus on the head, as you can see. I like the contrast and how I push the highlights on the horns, the scales and the skin, especially on the heads, yeah. For things I would change, I could push the white skin a bit further, but by adding more texture to it, like build in some wrinkles and stuff like that. I also think I should change the skin of the purple one. Like, the skin is too close to the scales and maybe it should have been more magenta than purple. But yeah, still really happy with them. Anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. For the next one, we're gonna tackle the crew, the platform, and the bases. But in the meantime, I have to go to a friend's spaceball practice. So until then, I hope you stay adventurous and that you keep painting, because painting is cool.